everybody, my name's Ben Hodgson. I'm the RDA for the Midlands region, joined today by Robbie Bell, who's the RDA for the Eastern region. We're both down at Grafton Water Sailing Club making the latest RA video on the topic of minimising the risk of and what to do in the case of an entrapment or an entanglement when sailors go afloat. So Robbie, I just wonder if I can come straight to you to perhaps give a bit of context about why we're doing this video today.
Yeah, so thanks Ben. Firstly, we all know that dinghy sailing is inherently safe, and we thought it was time to refresh that information and ensure that we could provide our clubs and our training centres with the latest tips and guidance to support safer sailing out on the water.
Brilliant, thank you Robbie. So we're going to start the video today by looking at some of the proactive measures that clubs or centres can put in place to try and minimise the risk of an entrapment or an entanglement.
We know that clubs and centres take safety very seriously, and we know that you've got procedures and policies in place across a range of different activities, but not everywhere has considered the risk of entrapment and entanglement, and we'd really like to encourage you to do some form of sort of formal risk assessment where you can look at the potential causes within your environment and then put in place some robust control measures to help mitigate for the chances of that actually occurring.
So having got your policies and procedures, it's really important to make sure that all of the people to whom that applies are aware of what they contain. So it may be, if you've got experienced sailors, your club racers for example, just an update in their notice of race or their sailing instructions. In the context of training, making sure that your instructor team deliver really strong briefings and good demonstrations, which would include what to do in the event of a capsize to make sure that you're not tangled in ropes and rigging and things like that. For your safety boat team, clearly it's really important that they are trained and aware of what to do in the event of a capsize, which would include checking for the risk of entanglement and then the subsequent entrapment too. So making sure that they've been trained, possibly some refresher training if it's been a while since they did their course, just to make sure they're fully up to date with the techniques available. Okay, so we're down at the boat park. And perhaps the first thing we do, even before getting to our boat, is look at the conditions to make sure they're suitable for our ability and well within our comfort zone. So looking out on the water here, we can see it's a slightly offshore breeze today. It's a little bit gusty, but it's relatively flat this side. And so I'm comfortable that for me today, that's perfectly appropriate. So the next stage really is to have a look at our boat and make sure it's rigged appropriately for the conditions. Okay, so here we are at the boat. And of course it's partially rigged as it is now. The most important thing we can do at this stage is just to make sure the boat is rigged appropriately and properly for the conditions. So whether that's reefing or going full sail, it's up to you on the day. Common sense stuff here, really making sure that tow straps are secure, any adjustment etc. is tied in properly. We've got the halyards secure in their bag or coiled and under the foredeck, and generally things are in good condition. Of course, the other thing we have on this boat is a righting line, so if we were to capsize, helm and crew could use this to help stop the boat from capsizing further or inverting, and we've taken an extra precautionary measure today by attaching a masthead float to the top of the rig. This will almost certainly prevent inversion, but in the very worst case it will certainly slow it down from occurring. So our boat now is ready to go out on the water and should support us in sailing safely. There's a lot of training centres and sailing schools that would use boats like the Laser Pico or toppers and things like that. Probably don't need quite that 30 or 40 litres worth of flotation. So what we have got, some smaller kind of pencil masthead floats, and they can just attach to the mast or the sail head right at the top there, do exactly the same thing, but obviously just a little bit smaller. And actually once they're rigged, you can furl these into the sail as well if you need to do a quick tow back on the water. Okay, so as well as checking our boat over, I need to make sure that we're ready to go afloat. So welcome Vanessa, going to be one of our sailors for today. So Vanessa's ready to go afloat, boots and wetsuit, fine, they're already on. Considerations around the buoyancy, make sure they are securely fitting so it can't sort of float off without you, but also there's no loose straps or fitments that could get caught on any other part of the boat. Clearly Vanessa's got slightly longer hair than I have, and it's tied back nicely out of the way, so again just can't get caught in any of the moving parts of the boat. On top of that, it could be possible to put headwear on, so a hat, a cap, if you've got loose hair that you can't tie back in that way as well. Okay, so before I go out to do my safety boat duties today, it's worth just thinking about the craft and my kind of familiarity with it. So do make sure that you're used to driving it, happy with all the procedures you should need. Thinking about the equipment, and again, being proactive and actually considering things being in place. Here you can see at the club here, they've actually got a couple of bits of equipment, cutting tools and a knife and things like that ready, really easy to deploy if I need to quickly. A little bit further back down the boat, on the back of the seat here, if I had to perform a capsize rescue and abandon the craft, so bring the crew back without the craft, I can mark that to identify that I've actually picked the crew up, so people aren't worried about where the crew have gone. And then further down the back, already rigged, tow line and bridle, ready to get into a tow or tow a boat upright if I need to do that quickly as well. The other thing I've rigged, again just thinking ahead, and not everybody will have space perhaps for something this big inflated, but a fender or a smaller marker buoy of some kind, is a masthead float with a quick clip on it, or a snap shackle, carabiner, something like that. So if a boat did capsize onto its side, I can quickly go to the mast tip, put the float on, and that will buy me and the crew some time just to deal with any snags that we may have within the craft before the rescue. So again, just a few things around the craft, proactive measures before we set off for our duty.
So what we're going to look at now are the actions that the safety boat and its crew should take if there is a capsize and a risk of entanglement or entrapment. And this is basically five key stages that we're going to look at. So stage one is a swift response. If there is a capsize and you can't see the sailors, then you do need to get there quickly but safely to make sure that we can move on to step two, which is to count heads. We need to make sure everyone on that boat is accounted for. And if you can't do that, then straight away calling for assistance whilst you then continue to investigate what's gone on. Step three is to right the boat. That is the quickest way to get people potentially from under the boat back up to the surface. And we're going to look at a couple of different ways of doing that in just a moment. Step four is to free the sailor. So if they are tangled in ropes or lines or rigging or their own equipment, make every effort to free them from that. And then step five, the final stage, will be to recover the sailors, potentially a casualty, back to shore. Remembering, if you do have to take the sailor away from the craft, is to mark the craft so that other people attending would know that you have the crew and that they are safe.
Once we're out on the water, one of the key things that we need to do is think about our positioning so that we locate ourselves in an area where we can access all parts of the sailing area, where we can attend capsizes reasonably promptly. So I like to position myself slightly to windward so that I can travel downwind fairly quickly to any capsized boats. If anyone has fallen in the water, anyone's capsized, even if they've righted their boat, we want to go over, we want to check they're okay, get a thumbs up, and then we're satisfied that that particular capsize is dealt with and we can move on. Also, just make sure you're communicating with other safety boats that are out in the area and think about your combined positioning.
So in this scenario, you will see that we've got a capsized craft. The safety boat straight away, a swift response. They've seen the boat go over and really quickly proceed to the area so that they can then move on to step two, which is to count heads. Actually, in this instance, quite quickly it becomes apparent that the crew are both present and accounted for. The fine. No further intervention is needed. The safety boat will just hold station whilst they right the boat themselves. Again, once the boat's up, checking the crew are fine to carry on, and then the sailors move away. So again, a fairly day-to-day process, but again, still considering that first stage, a swift response, counting heads, everything's safe, no problem, let's move on. In this scenario, we can see there's a dinghy that's capsized, lying on its side. Again, a swift response from the safety boat into the area, checking with the crew to make sure that they're okay and safe and accounted for, and then straight to the mast tip to attach the pre-prepared masthead flotation. This then frees the boat up to help with the rest of the capsize without having to stay at the mast tip. Really, really useful, particularly in the case of a single crewed safety boat. In this instance, we can see there's a capsized boat. So again, stage one, a swift response. The safety boat proceeds quite quickly to the sailing area. And actually, it becomes apparent that we can't see the people. So when it's stage two, we can't count heads. There's no one there, or if there is, we can't see them. So straight away, the crew and the helm are working quite hard to get the boat righted from its inverted position. So every effort made to do that. As the boat comes round, you'll notice that the crew person, which actually is myself, is up onto the centreboard to try and look inside the boat or under the boat, which would mean that I can check if there's anybody ensnared underneath it. In this case, there isn't, so I don't need to take an action of trying to free a sailor. Clearly, what we would do then is move on to trying to account for those people that should be on board. In this example, there is a catamaran fully inverted. Again, a swift response from the safety boat into the area and one of the crew straight on top of the inverted boat. If the crew from the catamaran could be seen just under the trampoline, for example, or snagged, it might be possible to free them or cut through the trampoline to make it possible to come to the surface. But without that, as we have in other situations, we can't see the crew, so we're going to quickly right the boat, which would bring anybody snagged underneath or entangled back up to the surface.
Okay, so we've been out on the water and you've seen us running through a few different scenarios, showing you a few different techniques for getting to craft and righting them. Ultimately, the key stages really are about making a swift response. So we want to position ourselves to get to a boat quickly. When we're there or close by, we want to be able to count heads, and if necessary, we then want to intervene and help right the boat by the quickest means possible. If someone is trapped, we then want to free them and we want to get them back to shore as soon as we can. So those are our kind of key 5 stages with dealing with the incident right there. And then once we're back at shore, we've got a few other things to look at. Ben?
Yeah, so if you do find, that you have an incident or a near miss at your club or your centre, always worth having a review of what took place and trying to really learn from those scenarios that you find yourselves in. So that might involve using your emergency action plan and kind of working through those stages depending on the severity of the situation you find yourself in, possibly needing emergency services. But when that situation is all resolved, like I say, have a bit of review, pick out the key parts of that incident and what may have really led to that taking place. What we have got on the RWA website is our online reporting tool. So what's really useful and partly why we've been able to show you some of the things today is by learning from other people's experience. So if you could fill in that form just with what you found, what took place, what actions you took, particularly any learning and any change that you implemented to prevent that happening again. And that really is our key message, is that sharing of learning for everybody so that we can prevent or at least minimise the risk of entrapment and entanglement. So we've talked a little bit about what to do if there is an incident at your club or your centre, and a little bit of a follow-up to that. I'd like to introduce Roy. Roy's from the sailing club here at Grafham, and Roy, I'm aware you did have an incident a while ago that you as a club kind of looked into and reviewed, and I just wondered if I could ask you to perhaps sort of summarise the actions that as a club you took in those kind of follow-up procedures.
So Grafham's had a safety advisor role, so there's a single point of contact for any safety related issues at the club. That's me at the moment. We keep a log of all incidents here so we can look at patterns and lessons learned rather than just have the incident, file it and forget it. We try and look at history and patterns so we can do prevention work. We'd much rather learn from the past and stop an incident happening than try and respond really well to it once it's happened. We always investigate, even if there's no injury. If there was the potential for an injury, it's worth investigating. We try and gather as much information as we can from as many people as possible, non-judgmentally, gather it all up and then sift through to pick out the learning points. And then the key point with that is actually making sure you do something about it, because it's really easy to let the report gather dust. So what we do is track the action points and make sure they're done. And again, that comes back to me as a safety advisor to go back and tap on people's shoulders and say, we were going to fit masthead flotation to all the club hire boats. We have done that, haven't we? And can you show me? So we've got the evidence that we've changed what we're doing to try and stop the event recurring.
Brilliant. And so in that follow-up sort of process, I'm quite curious about the relationship from yourself as a club and obviously from myself as an organisation, and kind of what happened there, if I can.
So just waiting for incidents to happen here at Grafham and then trying to learn from them here at Grafham is a lousy way to improve. We're much better off sharing the information more widely across the whole of the sailing world, and then we can learn from other people's mistakes or good ideas or top tips, and the RWA is the way to do that. So when we've had a potentially serious incident here, our first protocol is to ring the regional development officer and have a chat about it and give them a heads up, and then to log through the RA's instant recording form what happened here. And that way we can discover that actually 3 other clubs have had a similar thing, and there is a bit of a pattern, or we've heard about something that was going on in the south of France that might be relevant to this, and we can share that learning. So don't be inward looking, don't hold the problem with your own club, share it, and you'll find out that somebody else has had the same problem and come up with a really billy-whiz way of fixing it. And I'd much rather learn from somebody else than try and reinvent a wheel.
Oh, that's brilliant. Really good tips and advice. Thank you, Roy.
By way of summary, I'd like to cover the key areas that we've discussed, just to leave you with a few thoughts before we close. So initially, we want to try and prevent entrapment, so please do consider the risk at your venue and adopt appropriate procedures. Please make sure that all volunteers, sailors and instructors, safety boat crews are aware of their responsibilities, and make sure that everyone's prepared to go on the water, whether those are sailors, students or safety crews. Try and use those 5 stages when providing safety cover. Review any near misses or incidents so that we can learn from them, and make sure we report those to the RYA if they meet reporting triggers. And of course, we've only touched on some scenarios here today. Please do refer to the Safety Boat Handbook for further information and guidance. Thanks very much. We hope you found the video useful.